Hello and welcome to this webinar about the Parkinson's Plan with Dr. Ray Dorsey and Dr. Michael Okun. Dr. Ray Dorsey, a neurologist and global leader in Parkinson's research and care. He is also the co-author of the groundbreaking book, Ending Parkinson's Disease, and driving force behind the movement to address not just symptoms of Parkinson's, but the environmental causes and systemic neglect. His work is urgent, hopeful, and challenges all of us to think bigger about what's possible. Dr. Ray, thanks for being here.
My pleasure and honor to be with you, Larry.
All right. Dr. Michael Okun is also here. He's the chair of neurology at the University of Florida, medical advisor for the Parkinson's Foundation. Dr. Okun is one of the most respected voices in the field, both in the clinic and on the global stage. He's a movement disorder specialist with deep expertise in deep brain stimulation, patient-centered care, and making research accessible to the broader community. Dr. Okun has authored multiple books, contributed to thousands of publications, and is known for turning cutting-edge science into real-world strategies for people with Parkinson's. Welcome.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here, Larry.
They're also my good buddies, so it's good to have you here.
It's going to be a lot of fun.
You guys have a new book called The Parkinson's Plan. The Parkinson's Plan. Oh, there it is, right there. All right, it comes out this week. Your book opens with a bold statement. Parkinson's is preventable. That's not something we're used to hearing, so let's dig into that. What was the aha moment that made you realize Parkinson's isn't just about aging and genetics?
I had the gift of a sabbatical about 8 years ago, and I read the work of Dr. Caroline Tanner, who's a Parkinson's specialist like us and an epidemiologist. And she has quietly, diligently, persuasively over the last 40 years told us what the likely environmental causes of Parkinson's disease are. Everything from certain pesticides to dry cleaning chemicals, including a chemical called trichloroethylene. And I came away convinced that she was right, and I was disturbed that I hadn't recognized this sooner, or really hadn't been taught, other than some passing references to pesticides, about the environmental causes of Parkinson's disease. And for some people, genetics is important, but only about 15% of people in the United States and in most parts of the world carry a genetic cause or genetic risk factor for the disease, which implies that the environment is the predominant cause. And to the extent that environmental factors are, we can prevent the disease. When Dr. Parkinson described the condition in 1817, he said, I'm describing something that's not been classified in the medical literature. In almost all likelihood, he was describing something that was rare, if not extraordinarily rare. And I think in the next 10 years, Michael and I in the book, The Parkinson's Plan, lay out a roadmap for us to make Parkinson's increasingly rare again. And I can't think of a greater gift for future generations, for future Larry Gifford, for future Michael Okuns, and future Ray Dorseys, that they live in a world where Parkinson's disease largely does not exist.
Yeah, and think about it, Larry. Just jumping on to Ray. Just think about this. People widely criticized us when we called it a Parkinson pandemic back in 2013. Right. Then we wrote another book after 10 Secrets called Ending Parkinson's Disease. We said it again and it kept growing. We say it again in the Parkinson Plan. Now people have gone from disbelief to disillusionment and befuddled about the fact that Parkinson's, now take this in, Larry, take this one in, just take a pause. Parkinson's is growing faster than Alzheimer's disease. Just think about that. All of a sudden, the growth of this disease is absolutely explosive. And as Ray said, 15 cases, 13 to 15 cases, depending on which series that you read, might be due to genetics. And so there are other factors. And so when we say Parkinson's is preventable, we mean it. We need to move into the primary prevention business, and we need to be thinking about the things in our environment that we can change, that might change the trajectory for this generation and the next. This is a big deal. And also just think about Parkinson, Larry, needs to be a community disease. It's in the communities. Like everybody knows people in their families and people in their communities. We need to start to think about this as something that's becoming more and more common, and it should draw our attention, because as a community, we should be coming together about what we can do to prevent this disease.
If someone's listening and is worried about their risk, where do they start?
So in the book, we put out the Parkinson's 25 to do exactly that, because everywhere Michael and I went, people ask us, what can we do to slow our rate of progression if we have the disease, or what can our kids do to prevent the disease? So we give you 25 very simple actions you can take in your everyday life to prevent Parkinson's. Can I read one, Larry?
Sure, go ahead.
I'll just read the first one. Wash your produce, even your organic ones. Pesticides have contaminated our food supply. Remnants of pesticides are found in 20% of common foods. Organic produce, dairy products, and meat can reduce exposure, but can still have unsafe residues of pesticides. So wash your produce at least with water, and consider simple vegetable washes, vinegar, or salt solutions too. You know, if a smoker's diagnosed with lung cancer, what's the first thing that a physician's going to tell them to do?
Stop smoking.
Stop smoking. But if someone is diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, shouldn't the first thing we tell them is stop getting exposed to toxins linked to the disease?
Yeah.
And so we give you those 25 recommendations, things you can do with your food, things you can do with your water, things you can do with your air, things you can do in your everyday life that can possibly slow the rate of progression of the disease. And some of these have been actually studied, like air pollution likely increases the rate of progression. Ongoing pesticide exposure likely increases the rate of progression. If you want to have a slow rate of progression, look at the Parkinson's 25. And if you never want to have the disease, if you want to live a life free of this terrible disease, and you and Sonia and Tim know the disease sucks, if you want to live a life free of them, adopt these 25 right now.
You guys write about the secondhand pesticide drift. What is that?
Cigarettes, the danger of cigarettes isn't just limited to the people who smoke it. People became aware that secondhand smoke was dangerous for those people around it. So if you were in an airplane and people were smoking on the plane, they weren't the only ones inhaling cigarette smoke. Likewise in a bar. And that realization led to smoking being banned on airplanes and being banned in restaurants and bars. Well, it turns out that the people that exposure to pesticides is not limited to farmers and those who spray it, like golf course groundskeepers. It turns out research done by Dr. Kimberly Paul and Beata Ritz at UCLA last year showed that simply living or working near where a weed killer called Paraquat is sprayed is associated with a doubling of your risk of Parkinson's disease. And we've seen that also with this study about golf courses. Dr. Brittany Krasnowski and colleagues showed that living within 1 mile of a golf course in Rochester, Minnesota was associated with a 126% increased risk of Parkinson's disease. So it's not just people who work with these toxins like Paraquat that are at risk, but it's increasingly those who live or work near them, perhaps breathing it in, perhaps drinking water that's contaminated with it. Increasingly, all of us are at risk.
Let's talk about Paraquat. You brought it up. Why is it still on the U.S. soil if so many other countries have banned it? And what is it?
I think it's still around because we haven't made our voices heard, because we need not 8,000 PD Avengers, we need 80,000 PD Avengers. So if you haven't joined the PD Avengers, you haven't joined Larry Gifford, Sonia Mather, and Tim Hague, who devoted their last 5 years of their life to creating the PD Avengers, join the PD Avengers, pdavengers.com. It's free to join. Michael and I have joined, and it's the most powerful voice for people affected by the disease globally. Paraquat is a weed killer first created in 1962. It's sprayed on fields of corn, cotton, soybeans, and vineyards throughout the United States. It's been used to commit homicide and suicide. It kills the weeds that Roundup doesn't. Dr. Caroline Tanner and colleagues 10 years ago showed that farmers who use Paraquat have a 150% increased risk of Parkinson's disease. According to Kerry Gillum and The Guardian, the manufacturer Paraquat knew about its link to Parkinson's disease in the 1960s when it exposed laboratory mice, rats, and rabbits to Paraquat, and they developed the features of Parkinson's disease, including a tremor. Over 50 countries, including China, have banned the chemical. Over 50 countries, including China, have banned the chemical. The EPA's own website says 1 sip can kill, but has yet to take action to ban it. This is a great failure of our regulatory environment and a failure of our society.
Can childhood exposure set the stage for a diagnosis decades later?
Michael,
we think so. I mean, we definitely think so. And one of the ways to think about this, and by the way, one of the shocking facts is that if you take a country like the UK and Britain that's so well respected, and you look at their situation with Paraquat, they banned the Paraquat and then they export it to the United States. So, like you think to yourself, wait a minute, something's not right with that picture. So something to think about. The other thing that's really important, I think, for us to really give some deep thought to is the why. Why does Parkinson start? Why does it progress? Where does it start? And we talk a lot about this in the book. And it turns out that when you're born, okay, everybody has a different set of DNA. It's what makes us unique, right? So, and everybody has different brain cells. And just like if you were looking at appliances and you look at, let's say, the air conditioner in your house, it has a thermostat. Well, guess what, Larry? The cells in your brain, they also have little thermostats as well. And there's sort of I call it a Zenness meter. And we interviewed a lot of experts around the world about this. And how zen your cells are is sort of how healthy they are. Are they functioning well? Are they able to change the temperature when they need to change the temperature and go up and down? So let's say that you get exposed to an industrial pesticide or a chemical or something very early in life, okay? That can be a cumulative thing that begins to affect the cells in your brain. So you may not see an effect until later, and it may be how much you're exposed to. So you could get an early exposure. Second, the early exposures could also put you at risk for a second exposure, like you hit your head. Head trauma is also a risk factor for Parkinson's disease. You have a genetic. You're one of the 13 people in the Parkinson Foundation PD generation that has one of the 7 most common genes for Parkinson. But guess what? A lot of those people don't get Parkinson even though they have a gene, right? So something else has to happen. So we do believe that when you're born and in childhood, you have risk and you begin to accumulate your exposures. And one of the things that we're very interested in as we begin to make and call for in the new book is a proportional investment of people into prevention. And the way that we're going to have to do that is, guess what, Larry? We're not measuring like what's in our bodies, what we're exposed to. And so I think it's going to be important. And Ray talks a lot about the lead story, being able to measure lead and how that's changed to IQ points and how it's impacted our children and our next generations. It's a great example of how when we measure things, when we make awareness of things, when we understand where things start and where things go, how this can change the trajectory of a disease. And so we definitely think about this. And I love that question so much, Larry, because everybody thinks, reactively. After you get a disease, you're reactive. We're reacting to the symptoms. Wouldn't it be great if we were proactively thinking about what we could do to prevent disease? We call that primary prevention.
Is there any research that talks about, can a child be born with Parkinson's?
The more you look into it, and again, Michael and I are, just started looking the more concerned we get. So I'll give you the story. Brian Grant, Brian Grant Foundation, a member of the PD Avengers, is reading his great autobiography, former NBA basketball player who has Parkinson's disease, founded the Brian Grant Foundation. And in the book, he talks about how he was a 3-year-old boy when his father, a Marine, was stationed at Camp Lejeune during the time that the Marine base was contaminated with trichloroethylene, which is linked to Parkinson's. So that chemical also causes cancer. His father dies of esophageal cancer linked to the chemical. His younger brother, who's born at the base, nearly dies as a child and miraculously gets better after they leave the base. And then 30 years after his exposure, he develops symptoms of Parkinson's, including a tremor and decreased ability to jump off his left leg while playing the NBA, and is diagnosed with Parkinson's. The roots of his Parkinson's likely began when he was a 3-year-old boy drinking the water at Camp Lejeune. I also spoke to people at Camp Lejeune. One woman who was conceived at Camp Lejeune when her father, a member of the military, was based there. Her father developed Parkinson's disease, and then she later developed Parkinson's disease, even though she wasn't even actually born there. Obviously, toxins have a much bigger effect on smaller people. A given size of a toxin will have a much bigger effect on people, small people, babies, than you or I. The brain is developing. The blood-brain barrier is less developed. So I think the seeds of Parkinson's can begin at an extraordinarily young age. They might begin in utero. Conceivably, you could even wonder about it beginning before conception. And I think that's why we need to think about preventing this disease, why the Parkinson's 2025 is so important, is that these adult onset diseases may have their roots in childhood, and therefore we need to think about what our kids are being exposed to right now to make sure that they live lives free of these terrible diseases.
And I think it's such an important question, Larry, because I think there are so many known unknowns, to use a Donald Rumsfeld, quote, that it is really important that we actually ask that question and begin to assemble data on that question. And I don't think there's any, people that are confused that there may not be something right at birth that puts people at risk for certain diseases. And we just need to better understand that and how to keep those cells zen. Just to be simple, keep your cells zen so they don't develop disease, even if you have some preordained destiny from birth that you're headed down a neurodegenerative pathway.
Okay, so it's important for the people with Parkinson's and those who don't want to get Parkinson's to get this, but how do you think neurologists today appreciate the role of environmental factors?
Do you want my honest answer to that, Larry?
Yeah, that's why I'm asking these questions.
I don't think neurologists today, speaking as a neurologist, and we can get Ray's opinion as well, but we actually interviewed dozens of people for the book. And, I believe that certain fields like cardiology with your cholesterol, prostate cancer, diabetes with blood sugars, people are starting to learn how to monitor, learn how to be more proactive, learn how to try to prevent diseases. We're just not doing that in Parkinson's. Neurological practices are not preventative neurology. They are much more based on reacting to symptoms. And hopefully, as we begin to get more biomarkers, we'll be able to act earlier. But in terms of primary prevention, that means the idea that we need to get out there in front. Ray and I are huge voices in a field that just doesn't have a lot of voices saying we need to primarily prevent these diseases. And so when you go to your doctor, and particularly when you go to your neurologist, there's not a focus on primary prevention.
It's because we weren't taught. I mean, I didn't know, even Michael, like in our first book, you mentioned the first book, Michael and Boss were skeptical of even me, I would say.
We're all skeptical of you a little bit.
When I was writing, and Boss is now like gone way past me. I have to keep up with Boss. People just haven't listened, appreciate what Caroline Tanner, Beata Ritz, Allison Willis, again, woman in Toronto, Connie Maris, and others have been detailing for us. And if you look at it, it's clear. Last year, the Lancet Commission said that 45% of dementia is potentially preventable. Well, if 45% of dementia is potentially preventable, what portion of Parkinson's disease, which is far less heritable than Alzheimer's disease, is preventable? If 45% of dementia is preventable, then I think 80, 85, 90+% of Parkinson's disease is preventable. And our failure to prevent Parkinson's disease is a failure of us. Michael and I talk about this in the book. This is our failure. The failure of the Parkinson's community. It's a failure of the scientific community, and something that we are passionate about addressing. And that's why we wrote the book, to address this failure and to spare future generations this terrible disease.
The book is The Parkinson's Plan. Go out and get it now. Okay, folks, if you had a magic wand, what would be the first thing you'd ban, fund, or legislate?
Go ahead, Ray. You take that one on. That's a good one.
I want additional time to think.
I'm looking for this one.
Well, I think the good news in the United States is that we banned chlorpyrifos, a pesticide linked to it. We banned trichloroethylene and perchloroethylene. It looks like those bans will hold in the United States. It'd be great to extend those for the rest of the world. I think the lowest hanging fruit for quick policy action is to ban Paraquat. And then in the book, we put forth additional goals, increasing funding aimed at prevention. But I'll stop there and I'll let I gave Michael enough time to come up with a bit.
We did a red card campaign to the White House with our last book, with ending Parkinson's disease. And thank you to you, Larry, and to all the Parkinson Disease Avengers who actually were born after we wrote that book, which was really a cool thing to watch the grassroots birth of that. And we called for, the bans. So I think Ray talking about the ban, that's important, right? Because it's the change. Prevention isn't a pill, it's policy, right? And so I think Ray is absolutely right. For me, the wish list would be, wave that magic wand for the next 10 years, follow what we have in the book for the Parkinson plan, and we have laid out what is a $3 billion a year investment. We've studied and interviewed literally dozens of experts all over the world to try to understand what kind of investment we need to move the needle in Alzheimer's. We didn't, or in Parkinson's. And so we looked at Alzheimer's, we've looked at HIV, we've looked at breast cancer, we've looked at polio. We got to move the needle in these diseases. And so to move the needle in Parkinson's, it's going to take about $3 billion. And as part of that magic wand, we are going to divide it so that a proportional amount goes into prevention and into proactive strategies, but we're not going to leave people behind. And so the PLAN actually stands for something, just like the PACT in our last book. The PLAN in this book stands for prevention, right? So we're going to spend 25% of that $3 billion on prevention. The L stands for learning why. We need to know when Parkinson's starts, where it starts, how it progresses. We need to get to the core root cause to cut off the head of the snake, and
you can't solve what you don't know, right?
That's right. And we're focusing so much on the end of Parkinson and where those protein inclusions are and everything. So that's the L. The A is the amplification of our voices, and that needs to go on steroids. That's where the PD Avengers has been awesome. You all have, thousands and thousands of members, but we need tens of thousands of more of you to get behind this, like we did with HIV, and we did with breast cancer, and we did with polio, to really make change happen. And we want to expand the universe. So we're caring for the people. You said at the beginning, we're already at 12 million people. We need to care for those people, expand that care universe. We need to move toward, a plan like we have for HIV and cancer, where we have care navigators and we reduce the chaos in the system. And one of the quotes in the book that I think Ray really likes, this quote, comes from Star Wars, and maybe many of you may have heard of, but the American healthcare system for somebody with a disease like Parkinson is kind of like when Han Solo and Chewbacca are flying through on the Millennium Falcon. They're flying through that asteroid field, and they look at each other and they say, what are the odds we're going to make it through this asteroid field? And it's 1 in X, and that number is actually published. So and that is kind of the odds of somebody with Parkinson making it through not only the American healthcare system, but healthcare systems all over the world. And so we have to change that. And so we're moving from a patient as the sun model to the entire Parkinson universe. And then the N is for navigation of new therapies. And as Ray mentioned at the beginning, we have to have a 5-year, 10-year, and 15-year plan to move the needle and to fund that. So my magic wand funds the plan at $3 billion with a proportionate amount to prevention as to the other 3 areas.
Great. In the book, you guys talk about lighting the path for people already living with Parkinson's. Let's talk about what that looks like and where we're falling short. What would be a North Star for Parkinson's care actually looking like for a person living with disease?
People that know me know I always talk about, the person with Parkinson is the sun, and we should orbit around the person, right? And everything should operate around them. But it turns out that as we've studied other diseases, this is a good model, but one that needs to be expanded to be a whole Parkinson universe so that we can light those stars for people. So if you think of Parkinson's disease now as more than the person with the disease is the sun, and we look at the planets, what's the closest planet to the sun? It's Mercury. Okay, Mercury is the messenger, right? And so it gets hot if you're a care partner or caregiver when you're close to the sun, but you're also the one that knows the most about what's going on. And so we have to invest in our caregivers and care partners. And then the other planets that are coming around, those are the full multidisciplinary team that needs to come in and out seamlessly as you need the different care in the different areas. It can't be trouble getting parking. It can't be trouble seeing more than one person in the same day. We've got to move on models like we've done in HIV and cancer. Now, the almost planet is Pluto, as you know, Larry. And so we think of Pluto as the always circulating, it's always out there, the stigma. And we need to relieve the stigma for people both working jobs and people that are trying to live their lives. There should be no stigma for having Parkinson's disease in our society. And so it's a real thing. It's something that we write about and something that we're passionate that we need to do. Now, satellites that are up there and all the satellites that are orbiting, those satellites are help us with wearables. They help us with the ability to monitor the disease. They help us with biomarkers, all of those things that help to guide us along the way. And the stars, as you say, are all the support groups and organizations like the PD Avengers that are up there. So you can look up, you can find the North Star. So the PD Avengers is perhaps the brightest of those stars, with about 10,000 people that are there. And I spoke a little bit about that asteroid field. And the asteroid field is the healthcare systems in the USA and around the world, right? And navigating through those asteroid fields and thinking about Chewbacca and Han Solo and how we're going to help them to get that Millennium Falcon through. So that's how we're rethinking what we need to do. And then, of course, telemedicine is going to have to be key to this, and not forgetting the forgotten Joes and forgotten Jills, the people that can't get to their appointments anymore, and then they fall off. They all of a sudden they fall off the system and they're not getting care. And so we talk a lot about how we need to really rethink this as a system-wide effort.
You mentioned care partners. How do we better support them?
So, it turns out that one, we need to just look at the data. The data suggests that people that have good care partners do better. They have better outcomes. They have less health costs to society. They do better. They stay at home. They go to the hospital less. They get into less trouble, right? So that sounds like a pretty damn good investment to me. So one, we need to make an investment into them and make sure that they have the services that they need to make sure that they stay mentally in good spirits. And it's hard being a caregiver and making sure that we're providing the services to them and providing the adequate services to the person with Parkinson to be sure that they can navigate through the system. So that's first. Second, I always challenge the people that come into the practice when, women get Parkinson less than men. It doesn't mean that they don't get Parkinson, but when women get Parkinson, often, but not always, the care partner is the man, right? And it turns out that the data shows us when the care partner is the man, they give less support to the woman with Parkinson. So every time I see that, I always challenge men to step up to the plate, swing a little harder, give a good effort. It's not good enough to just say, oh, well, of course I'm a great caregiver. Every guy that I talk to says that. We need to challenge them, show them the data, educate them, and make sure that they're stepping up to make sure that everybody is getting care. So part of it is that 50,000-foot view of creating the resources that we need and making it about community, getting the community around people, connecting them to the Parkinson universe, reducing and removing stigma, and hopefully 100% removing stigma, and then making sure that people have access to things. And one big shocker for you is that dopamine isn't available in many, if not most, countries around the world. And so we have an effort.
2/3 of the countries.
Yeah, so we have a big effort both in this book, both at the Fixell Institute locally. I know Ray is very passionate about this. We have a big effort to try to make sure that people have access to dopamine. I mean, it's unconscionable, Larry, that we can get HIV drugs to anybody on this planet that needs them, but we can't get dopamine, a drug that's over 50 years old. Come on, we got to do better than that. So
we must do better. All right, Ray, how can telemedicine be a tool for equity and not just convenience?
Well, I think if you step back and said, if someone's sick, how should they be cared for? And I think logically, it makes sense that healthy clinicians like Michael and I should be delivering care to sick patients on their terms. And that means delivering care where they are as opposed to where we are. And telemedicine allows care to be brought to people in their own homes and their own environments where they want it to be received. I mean, earlier today, I was just speaking to a family that's dealing with a father who's got Parkinson's or dementia with Lewy bodies and is in Jersey Shore and not able to access the care that he needs, and he likely needs an expert to provide the care. He just doesn't have access simply because of where he lives. And telemedicine is a tool to provide that care to people. I think we're also not even thinking about the vast potential for like smartphones and everything else to help identify people who might have disease. Lots of people in the United States, 20+% are undiagnosed with the disease who are suffering. Around the world, it could be as high as 40+% are undiagnosed. I think there are ways, smartphones and other things that can identify who has Parkinson's disease And those same tools which are measuring the disease can be used to connect people to care providers, whether that's a nurse, a physician, a clinician, so that people, regardless of who they are, where they live, can get the right care that they need.
Every day, well, actually every 20 seconds, somebody in the world is diagnosed with Parkinson's. Every 20 seconds. So what advice would you give to a primary care doctor seeing their first PD patient?
Yeah, so for me, the most important message, and one that just doesn't seem to come across no matter how many times we say it, is that when you are with somebody for the very first time and they are going to receive a diagnosis of Parkinson, I would just say, please close your eyes and think to yourself, you're about to tell somebody those words, you have Parkinson's disease, 4 words. They're going to remember that moment for the rest of their lives. It's going to be imprinted in their brain. It's a very important moment.
August
And
18th, 2017.
There you go, Larry, right? And so so what I would say is close your eyes and just think hard about that, and think hard about the snapshot of the picture, the way that your face looks, the way that you're delivering the news, and also making sure that even if you don't know a lot about Parkinson, making sure that you don't paint it as a death sentence. You don't paint it as Alzheimer's disease. And no disregard to my great friends at the Alzheimer's Association and that group. I love them, but we do Alzheimer's at Fixel too. But it's not Alzheimer's disease. It's not ALS. It's not a brain tumor. It's not a terrible stroke. It can be a very livable disease. And we have a lot of things that we can offer. And a lot of times people in the primary care settings and folks with Parkinson just equate the diagnosis to it's Parkinson's, Alzheimer's. It's the same thing. I have heard that so many times, and it just, it's just, if I could, you asked me about the magic wand and what I would ask for, one of my magic wands, would be or swipes would be to take that out of people's brains. Parkinson's is not Alzheimer's. There's so much you can do. Let's get you the help and get you the things that you need to do. And in fact, it can be quite livable, and we have lots of drug treatments, lots of behavioral treatments, lots of great things that are coming, some surgeries that are really cool. And we're going to create a plan so you can get on with your life. And so that would be how I would think about it. And as you may know, I've given a lot of thought to this as the medical director and advisor to the Parkinson Foundation, and written a lot about this in many books over the years. And I give us a failing grade. I give myself an F for it, no matter how much, we put out the effort to help, to educate. And maybe, all the proceeds for this book, Parkinson Plan, go to charity. Maybe we can just get the word out to more and more people. And if we do that, then we can change the impressions, which I believe are false and are blatantly false. And so I think it's, and by the way, this was not a setup at all for people who are listening. Larry said, he told me that the date, of when he was diagnosed with Parkinson, it's an imprint. It's a big deal. And so we need to treat it as such.
I want to know what advice you'd give him, Larry.
Oh boy, I think that I would, similar to Dr. Okun, but it's you got to understand, as much as we're not giving them a death sentence, we're giving them a life sentence. And it is a slow drip, 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 drip of symptom changing, and it's a full-time job, really. It becomes a full-time job. It's not at first, but I think you can't overwhelm them with too much information, but you got to give them enough that they can take action. And what I found lacking during my diagnosis, and I hear this all the time, is you're not sent home with a brochure or anything. You just sent home with those 4 words, and you get to Mr. Google and start trying to piece it all together. So what I would suggest is that every medical facility that diagnoses people with Parkinson's have a brochure on what people can do. What are the local resources for exercise, for mental health, for all these things? Because you need to build your team. And how do you build your team if you don't have that information?
People needed, we just need to get after it. Like,
Yeah.
I think the suffering is unnecessary and we just need to get after it. So if you haven't joined the PD Avengers, join the PD Avengers, get after it. If you have means, support the PD Avengers, get after it. We got after it in 1938. We got after polio and we created a March of Dimes. People like Larry Giffords of the 1930s, 1940s got after polio and we got rid of polio. The March of Dimes doesn't even support polio work because it's largely non-existent. If we get after Parkinson's disease, if you join the PD Avengers, if you give financial contributions to the PD Avengers, we get rid of it. Michael and I in the book say by 2035, 10 years from now, the rise in Parkinson's disease adjusted for age stops. That the change in incidence in Parkinson's disease globally is 0%. That means by 2036, Larry has us back on this show to talk about the fall of Parkinson's disease. And we give you a plan for doing that, but we got to get after it. We got to help Larry, Sonia, and Tim get after it. 8,000 people is not enough PD Avengers. It needs to be 80,000, 800,000 PD Avengers. It's free to join. Larry is more eloquent than Michael and I about this. It's not a death sentence, it's a life sentence. I mean, it's beautiful. Only Larry Gifford can say that. The people who are going to change the course of this disease are not Ray and Michael, it's Larry, Sonia, and Tim. Support the PD Avengers, sign up to be a member, so give them financial support if you have the means to do so. And let's get after it like we did for polio, like we did it for drinking and driving, like we did it for HIV. We owe future generations a world that is spared the suffering and indignity of Parkinson's disease.
Great. So much of the book asks the question, why? Why is this happening? Why now? The gut-brain connection keeps coming up. How close are we to proving that PD starts in the gut or the nose?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't think it's a question of how close we are. I think it's a question of, are we beginning to understand and appreciate from a science perspective that Parkinson's disease is not just a disease of the brain, it's a disease of the body, Larry. And so the Parkinson proteins show up in your skin, they show up in your gut, they show up in multiple organs, they show up in your nerves, right? We're not talking about something that is limited to just the brain and brain cells. And so perhaps just in the same way that people with Parkinson and persons with Parkinson's and families and the general public are bewildered thinking Parkinson's is like Alzheimer's, I think a lot of our scientists are bewildered and don't even know, like if you quiz them, that this is not just a disease of the brain. Having said that, there's a lot of accumulating evidence now that there are changes in the microbiome, changes in the gut, changes in the gut-brain connections. There are all sorts of really cool experiments. I had the opportunity to interview one of the world's top scientists in this area, Tim Sampson at Emory, and talk about his life, growing up close to Pittsburgh and how he got into the microbiome and how these gut-brain experiments that he did with Masmanian and colleagues when he was in California have become so important for us to begin to understand inflammation in general and how these things can lead to disease. Parkinson's isn't one disease. And so that's one of the challenges. And so when you look at Per Borghammer, who was also interviewed for the book, Per talks a lot about, brain first, body first Parkinson, which might explain, toxins, the idea of when you acquire the toxins either through the air by breathing them things or through the gut by eating them. And so that's another theory, but I think it's a mistake, a fundamental naivety if we paint it with such a broad brush that we begin to sell ourselves as there's one Parkinson and one cause, and that it's always in the gut, it's always in the brain. We've got to go back to that L and learning why. Where does it start in each case? Why does it start? How does it spread? What's going on with the zenness of the cells that changes them, whether or not you have a gene, and it might change if you have a gene or you don't. The minority of people have a gene. And it's very clear that there are changes in the microbiome. And it's also clear that diet matters in Parkinson as well, both in your risk of getting Parkinson and also in the treatment potentially of symptoms and absorption of medications. And so So we talk about nutritional overreach in the book, and that's where you have all these dietitians and people who are like super smart and they tell you have to do all these things. I call it nutritional overreach because there's not data to really support all of that. But we're gaining a lot of data and things in the Mediterranean diet, the mind diet, understanding, what's driving some of the inflammation. And we're starting to get there. But I also believe, and let me just say this for your listeners, I believe if you have Parkinson, you should enjoy some of your life, right? You shouldn't take away things in your diet that even though they may not be as good for you, if you really enjoy having just a little tiny bit of wine in the bottom of a glass, that's okay. If you really want to have a little bit of a steak, you got to have a little bit.
So you've been out with me, Michael. There's going to be a little bit more than that in class.
Yeah, but it turns out, Larry, that sometimes our voices are so strong, and what people hear is no, 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 instead of let's create a plan for your life that makes sense based on the data and will help you to live your best life with Parkinson. Because in my friend Larry Gifford's terms, it's a life sentence, not a death sentence.
All right. Well, that was a 101 on the body first, brain first, Parkinson's, and everything else. Why have we been so slow to fund or believe in environmental causation?
I think some of it's deliberate. The tobacco industry hid the risks of smoking by having doctors advertise the health benefits of cigarettes. The lead industry had a Dutch boy advertise the benefits of having clean paint and white schools. The opioid pandemic was fostered on lies. I was taught in medical school that it was almost impossible to get someone in pain addicted to opioids, and that was false. And we know that social media companies, according to the Wall Street Journal, were hiding the health effects of their product on teenage girls' mental health. And so, according to reporting from Carrie Gillum and others, pesticide manufacturers knew about the health risks of their product and have concealed them. So we've been duped. I've been duped. Michael's been duped. A lot. Boss has been duped. A lot of us have been duped. So I think some of it's that way. Some of it's structural. 60% of funding for biomedical research in the United States comes from pharmaceutical and medical device firms, which are focused on developing treatments for the disease, but not necessarily focused on preventing it. Some of it's cultural. We live in an age of genetics, and we have great tools for assessing the genetic causes of disease, and we're taught in training that to look for those genetic causes, and we're taught to be deeply skeptical of the environmental causes, even though most of the diseases that are common, like cancer, lung cancer, largely didn't exist before cigarettes were introduced. Mesothelioma is due to asbestos, intellectual disabilities due to lead and pesticides. Diabetes and obesity due to ultra processed foods, fast foods, and excessive soda consumption. So I think those are reasons why. But if you peel through, and Michael and I give our best to peel through in the Parkinson's plan, you come up to I think the hopeful conclusion that this disease, unlike Huntington's disease, which is just a single gene that causes it, and not much you can do. Well, just a single gene that causes it. But this is a disease that has environmental roots and therefore preventable. We can take actions to prevent people from getting it. We can likely take actions to prevent people to slow the rate of progression of disease, to allow people to. I think some of it's that way. Some of it's structural. 60% of funding for biomedical research in the United States comes from pharmaceutical and medical device firms, which are focused on developing treatments for the disease, but not necessarily focused on preventing it. Some of it's cultural. We live in an age of genetics, and we have great tools for assessing the genetic causes of disease, and we're taught in training that to look for those genetic causes, and we're taught to be deeply skeptical of the environmental causes, even though most of the diseases that are common, like cancer, lung cancer, largely didn't exist before cigarettes were introduced. Mesothelioma is due to asbestos, intellectual disabilities due to lead and pesticides. Diabetes and obesity due to ultra processed foods, fast foods, and excessive soda consumption. So I think those are reasons why. But if you peel through, and Michael and I give our best to peel through in the Parkinson's plan, you come up to I think the hopeful conclusion that this disease, unlike Huntington's disease, which is just a single gene that causes it, and not much you can do. well, just a single gene that causes it. This is a disease that has environmental roots and therefore preventable. We can take actions to prevent people from getting it. We can likely take actions to prevent people to slow the rate of progression of disease, to allow people to live long, healthy, and productive lives even after a diagnosis. But we have to wake up, learn why the disease began, and change our orientation. And that's what we do in the Parkinson's plan. We chart a new path to preventing and treating the disease.
One of the big buzzwords the last 10 years around Parkinson's is biomarkers. What is it? Where are we in the biomarker sphere right now?
Yeah, so imagine, Larry, if you have a disease.
I do.
And okay, you have a disease. Good. All right, let's start there. It's a great starting point. Okay. Awesome. That was not a plant for everybody who's listening. Okay. So imagine you have a disease. Okay. And you want to know how that disease is progressing. It turns out that it doesn't work very well to have people tap their fingers and rate them on 0 to 4 old-fashioned scales. We need methods not only to diagnose whether or not somebody has a disease or not, and still the best diagnosis, even with all the modern things that we have, from skin biopsies to DAT scans to new MRIs to PET scans, it's still the response to medications and the examination is still the most important thing over time. So now imagine that we can actually understand biologically what's changing and measure it over time, from the time of diagnosis that you have something, and differentiate it from other things so we don't make a mistake. I know it's, going to shock you, Larry, but doctors make mistakes all the time with diagnosis.
Doctors are perfect. I know that.
Okay.
You've told me that over and over, doctor.
Yes, exactly. So imagine you can get that diagnosis right, differentiate it from other diseases, and then follow it over time. If you can do that, what a lot of folks don't fully appreciate is that will accelerate our ability to develop new treatments, because we'll be able to measure it over time. And then we'll be able to know when we actually give a treatment, is it slowing down the disease progression? Is it impacting just the symptoms of the disease or not? And sometimes those two things get mangled together and mixed together, and it can be very hard to tell. And so the ability to understand when things start, to diagnose it, and then to measure it as it changes in a more precise, simple, practical, and accessible way is going to help us to drive new treatments. So instead of needing tens of thousands of people to sign up for studies, we might be able to answer questions with only 100 or 200 or 300 people, and imagine how many therapies we can push through the pipeline. And so when we say biomarkers, people should just forget about that name. All we're talking about is the ability to measure something and to measure it over time accurately, really accurately, like your blood sugar. That's a pretty accurate measure. Like, imagine if you could measure that over time, okay, in Parkinson, and really monitor what's going on. It could be a game changer. And that's the reason that we're so interested in this area.
Well, so I've heard about spinal fluid. I've heard about blood possible. I've heard about like a skin wipe. Where are we at from your perspective?
Yeah, so in my mind, there are a whole bunch of different ways that you can do this. And again, it highlights and emphasizes this idea that Parkinson is a full body disease, right? You can get it in the spit, you can get it in the salivary gland, you can get it on the skin, you can get it out of the blood, right? Pretty interesting, huh, Larry? And so where we are right now is that the FDA has approved a test called the DAT scan, the dopamine transporter scan, to tell the difference between somebody having some sort of abnormality with dopamine, not necessarily Parkinson's disease, but it might be Parkinson's, versus essential tremor. Okay. We have a CLIA, which is a lab certification for a test called a skin biopsy. So you can see if you have synuclein in your skin, and they take a biopsy usually from your neck and then from your leg and your ankle, usually in 3 places. And so we have a skin biopsy. Most recently in JAMA Neurology with David Valancourt and colleagues, we have a multi-center study that shows that they can use an MRI, a 6-minute MRI sequence, to tell whether you have Parkinson's, MSA, or PSP. So that's an advance for the field. And then there are in research these blood tests and tests in your spinal fluid, the fluid that bathes your spinal cord and your brain, to look at these protein clumps called synuclein, which is one of the abnormal proteins in Parkinson. And they look at seeding. How does the synuclein seed in a test tube? And how is it clumping together? And can we use that to diagnose Parkinson and tell the difference between Parkinson and another disorder called MSA? None of them are completely perfect. All of them miss, on certain things. And one of the most important things is still the examination. So still having a great exam with your doc, the exam over time, being honest over time, keeping your eyes open to what you see, and making sure your medications are optimized in the response to medication treatments. If we develop a great test, we need it to be cheap. We need it to be available. So we need it to be like a finger prick, a tiny bit of blood that you could do in any continent, including Antarctica and Africa, make it available to people. That could be a game changer, right? For getting the diagnosis right where you don't have expertise, right? And so not only do we have to think about how these things are going to roll out, how accurate they are, but we also have to think about access and making sure we don't disadvantage people, both for access to clinical trials, but also for access to care. So, a simple blood test, a simple MRI scan, things that are very simple and practical are going to be potential game changers for the field and help us to move and to take the next step, particularly as we start to move toward primary prevention too. And why shouldn't we be talking about primary prevention of Parkinson? People say, oh, it's crazy. You shouldn't. No, we should definitely be talking about preventing this disease that's exploding out of control. Why you're not talking about it is absolutely beyond my comprehension. And so in order to do that, we're also going to have ways to measure it and to measure it early.
Are there any promising therapies on the horizon that just aren't another way to deliver levodopa?
Yeah, so in the book, we try to divide it into the N is for navigation of new therapies. We divide it into near term, things we can do right now, next 6 to 10 years, and 10 to 15 years. Understanding that Parkinson isn't one disease is sort of the key to developing therapies. I do believe that some of the genetic therapies, specifically if you have one of the genes, if you're one of the 13 people that has one of the 7 most common genes in Parkinson, then you might qualify for one of the newer types of treatments, either gene editing or gene therapy, or a specific medication that goes in the trial, in the pathway that's related to the gene that you have. Now, some genes make too much of things. They call that gain of function. Some things take function away. They call it loss of function. And we can choose either gene therapies. We can choose gene editing. We can also choose to reduce inflammation if we know that things are caused by inflammation, by inflammasomes and other techniques. So that's for people, the precision medicine with folks who have those specific genes. I think we're going to see that now being tested in the near term. We're already seeing that. For the folks that are the other, group of the 87% of other people that don't have the 7 most common genes, we also have the same things going on. We're still looking at gene therapy. We're looking at regenerative medicine. We're looking at taking a closer, peek at, could we use regenerative medicine differently? I think people have had enough of saying stem cells is going to cure Parkinson. I think they've had 20 years of that. But what they are beginning to see, and we interviewed a couple of the world's experts on regenerative medicine, is there are specific areas in the brain for thinking in Parkinson that we don't do a great job in treating. DBS does a great job for movement. It does a great job in medications for movement and dyskinesia and on-off fluctuations. But what if we could use the stem cell to restore or prevent you from losing cognition? What if we could use a gene therapy against, walking, disorder? So specifically looking at those areas. And then the final area that I'll mention today is the area of nanomedicine. And so we always say in the book, we're going to be going smaller, Larry, smaller, that surface area to volume ratio. We can get it across that barrier called the blood-brain barrier and use a whole bunch of different techniques to deliver all sorts of things within the brain. And we can now also model Parkinson in something called organoid. So Parkinson's in a dish, so we can get some answers faster than what we've had access to
Can you
with
put my
clinical
Parkinson's
trials.
in a dish?
Yeah, so I think
Just take it out.
having the GIF, everybody knows I call you the GIF in a dish. that'll be, it's like Elf on a Shelf.
Available now at a store
GIF,
near you.
GIF in a dish. So
yeah. Okay, last question. How much impact can lifestyle, exercise, diet, sleep, community actually have on progression?
I'm going to tell you what a little smoking analogy. This is from the American Lung Association. Actually, I just pulled it up. So within hours of smoking your last cigarette, your heart rate drops to normal, your carbon monoxide levels in your blood begin to normalize. Within months of smoking your last cigarette, coughing and shortness of breath decrease, lung function improves. Within years of stopping smoking, your risk of heart disease begins to plummet. A decade after you smoked your last cigarette, your risk of lung cancer is halved. We should find out what happens if we change our environments, our behavior, and our surroundings for Parkinson's disease. What would happen if people with Parkinson's disease stopped getting exposed to pesticides? When did they stop getting exposed to dry cleaning chemicals? When did they stop getting exposed to air pollution? When did they started exercising at least an hour a day? What happens if they started adopting a Mediterranean diet? What happens if they stopped getting exposed to pesticides from golf courses and nearby farms? What happens if they started wearing helmets and got less head trauma? I think we can change the course for the 12 million Americans and people around the world who already have the disease, and we can create a world where Parkinson's disease the rise of Parkinson's disease stops in the next 10 years, and we can start thinking about a world without Parkinson's disease. All these things are within our individual controls. If we take action now, right now, while you're listening right now, you can change the course for yourself and change the course for your children, loved ones, and all future generations to come.
Do you have a plan? And do we have a plan as Society for Parkinson? Do you have a plan? And do we have a plan? And we're not going anywhere if we don't get a plan.
You got a plan. It's called the Parkinson's Plan. And it's available now at a bookstore near you. Michael and Ray, thanks so much for your time. We've covered a ton of stuff. What's the one thing that you want folks to take away from this conversation?
Parkinson's is preventable, and we have an obligation to create a world where future generations are spared the indignity of this disease.
Yeah, for me, it's why should we not be talking about prevention and primary prevention? It's time, folks, and this is growing out of control, and those numbers are publicly available, and we need to start talking about primary prevention for this generation and the next.
Gentlemen, thanks for your time.
It's a pleasure.